What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about Gen Z, because I know that there are a lot of mixed opinions about this new generation. Whether it's boomers or millennials, I feel like Gen Z has built itself quite the reputation for being a few things, like having the attention span of a goldfish, being addicted to our phone screens, eating Tide Pods for some reason. But there's a lot more to the picture than just a blanket statement about who we are. And when I say we, I mean I am technically a part of Gen Z since I am born later than 1996, but on a more emotional or spiritual level, I don't feel like I am exactly Gen Z, and I'm kind of in this weird middle ground between Gen Z and millennial. But in today's video, I'm not really here to rip on Gen Z, but rather show that there are a few things that I think we all could learn from this new generation, because you know, like it or not, Gen Z is here to stay and they're about to take over a significant part of our workforce. So yeah, they're here to stay. However, this isn't to say that we should always follow what Gen Z does, because eating Tide Pods is never a good idea. But if you're looking for another source of info that isn't necessarily just from Gen Z, I would suggest checking out the sponsor of today's video, Shortform. Shortform is an online learning resource where you can get high quality summaries to nonfiction books. If you're interested in topics like business, finance, personal development, entrepreneurship, relationships, spirituality, you name it, Shortform has the guide for you. Within each book summary, you can find comprehensive coverage as well as exercises that you can do so you make sure that you can apply the learnings that you get. So if you're looking to get access to the world's best ideas, I highly recommend checking Shortform out. And because they are the sponsor of today's video, if you use the link in my description, you can get a discount in your annual subscription. So check out Shortform. The first lesson that I think that we can all take from Gen Z is to kick tradition to the curb when that doesn't serve you. For example, you might think of the high school archetypes like a jock or a nerd, and you couldn't be either one or the other. With Gen Z, they don't really believe that at all. You're allowed to be an athlete but also enjoy computer games. You could be a bookworm and a gamer. Just think about those three characters from High School Musical that basically got slandered because they strayed from the status quo. Well, Gen Z is not afraid to do that. And obviously, we shouldn't be afraid to do that as well. I think another great example of this can be seen in the workplace. If there's some sort of process or tradition that exists simply because that's how it's always been done, you know, that's not really a convincing argument for Gen Z anymore. We want actual reasons behind why we do them, and if they don't work for us, then we're going to scrap them and come up with our new own ways. We already see Gen Z trickling into the workforce right now, and a lot of corporate professionals are kind of confused about the way they work. There are instances of Gen Z taking a day off because of their period or because of their mental health. And that used to be a bit more taboo back in the day when it was just boomers or Gen X. Like, I don't think that's something that you really did. Some are even going as far to delegate work to their millennial bosses, which I think is like a little scary and something that I wouldn't do. Or it depends on the definition of delegation. Like, I'm not going to tell my boss, here, you do this, but if I do need help with a work task, I am going to ask if they can help me. Perhaps the way you view delegation is pretty important when you understand this context. The philosophy when it comes to work used to be just power to the employers and you're supposed to just shut up and do what you're told. And that's what we've been doing for the past few decades. Until Gen Z just came along and they were like, yeah, no, we're not gonna do that. Lots of Gen Z are behind the anti-work movement, and they're really not afraid to quit a job if their working conditions are not conducive to a good working environment. Maybe that's why instead of trying to be astronauts or doctors or lawyers, kids are trying to be content creators or influencers. Because I mean, like, it's really hard to not see the appeal behind being an influencer. You get paid by brands to make content, you get to work your own hours, you get to be your own boss. Like, that's kind of the dream, right? Except they don't realize maybe until later that content creation is actually a pretty difficult job, and trying to have a content strategy, trying to stay organized, looking at all of your different social media channels, choosing which channels you want to make, and then having to actually execute on that content, creating the content, editing the content. Yeah, I mean, content creation is basically hard work is what I'm saying. From my understanding, Gen Z is really just trying to find more meaning in their lives aside from their identity at work or the job that they do. And yes, sometimes they might come across as feeling entitled or needing to be special all the time, but I think that's something that all humans want to have, not just Gen Z. A sense of accomplishment, a sense of individuality, a sense of purpose. That even if you don't fit into some sort of specific mold that society wants you to fit into, you should still be able to be yourself and be happy being the way you are. Next, we have valuing self-love over a partner. Recently, there was a survey done on 16,000 13 to 25-year-olds in the UK. 21% of respondents said that a relationship with themselves is more important than a romantic partner, while 16% said that a romantic partner is more important than a relationship with yourself. And to me, this is kind of relieving because I have said in previous videos, like, self-love is so important. And if you don't value yourself, how are you supposed to expect other people to feel the same about you? If you don't love yourself and you feel like there's some sort of void in your life, and then you get into a relationship, you might place a burden on your partner that they need to fill up that void in your life or somehow complete you. And that is never a really good foundation for a healthy relationship. And if you're looking to cultivate more acts of self-love, it's important to perform acts of self-care. So this could look like going to bed at a reasonable hour, feeding your body with nutrient-dense foods, going to the gym, exercising, buying yourself something nice because you deserved it, drinking more water, finding activities that you enjoy that'll help nurture your relationships with friends and family, as well as nurture your relationship with yourself, are all things that I champion, and I think Gen Z is on the right track for this one. So props to Gen Z. I mean, props to me. Props to us. Now, I'm not exactly sure how to label this last lesson, but I do think that we have to talk about Gen Z's inclination for social activism. You'll see the younger generations protest for a lot of different social causes like climate change, body positivity, racial equality, gender equality. Now, some people may think that protesting is just trendy nowadays or that it's more for virtual signaling, but I don't really think that's the case. Take climate change, for example. Now, I'm not trying to get too political here, but it seems like our leaders in the past 100 years haven't really been doing anything to mitigate the impacts of what's happening to our environment and what's happening to the planet. And now we as Gen Z, because we're bound to outlive a lot of the boomers and other generations above them, feel like they're obligated to carry the torch and make sure that by the time they are boomers age right now, they're still living in a planet that's habitable for them. And I think in general, Gen Z tends to have a bleak outlook on the state of the world. Like, you see a lot of tensions rising politically, the socioeconomic gap is bigger than ever. It's really hard to find hope in instances like these when you see like so many issues happening in the world. Like, I was having a conversation with my friends on whether or not they would like to have kids. And one of them answered, it's not even about whether I want to have kids, it's whether I'll be able to afford it, whether I can even think about having kids because the planet is dying. And it's like, is it too selfish of me to want to have a child and still have a family? Because those decisions that we make will not only impact us, but, you know, obviously the child that they decide to bring into the world, the financial impact a child could have, and nowadays it's getting even more difficult to raise one. So it's a very complicated question now to ask someone if they want to have kids, because there are just way too many factors that come into play, and a lot of Gen Z will say it's not that simple. But the point I want to make about Gen Z being so involved in activism is to show that they care. Like, that's the most important part. The way they show their concern for the world not only lies in activism, but the way that they interact with brands as well. Oh, your company profits off of child labor? Canceled. Oh, your company policies are misogynistic? Canceled. Gen Z typically won't just talk the talk, but they'll also walk the walk when it comes to their values. But I think the last lesson that we can really take from Gen Z is that they're willing to care and they're willing to live out their values. Gen Z finds it really important that your actions match your words. And that's basically what integrity is. I think having integrity is important, obviously, and every day you make a decision to stick to your values, to stick to your code, whatever system that you follow. So if you are a marketer for Gen Z, or you're trying to influence Gen Z to do something, you better bet that branding is going to be super important. And you got to make sure that your company's actions or whatever cause that you align with is also in alignment with Gen Z's values. Now, even though I am a part of Gen Z, I still feel like I have a very narrow vision of the entire picture. So if you are Gen Z, which I think a lot of you are, feel free to leave your comments and let me know if I was right or wrong in this instance. And if you're a millennial or older, what are your thoughts on Gen Z? Like, do you think that Gen Z is overall a good generation? But yeah, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, and I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. And as always, take it easy.